Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spring Tribal Climate webinar. My name is Stefan Tangin. I'm the Tribal Resilience Liaison for the North Central region. I work for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance in coordination with the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center, hosting this webinar from the traditional lands of the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne peoples and numerous other indigenous peoples outside of Denver, Colorado. The Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance is a nonprofit organization that serves as advisory committee to the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association on all matters with regard to technical and policy issues regarding the water resources of member tribal nations. And if you want to learn more about the Water Alliance or the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, I'm going to put those links into the chat. The goal of this monthly webinar is to provide tools and resources for tribal resource managers to use in addressing climate change. For the next several months, we'll be focusing on drought specifically, trying to bring resources to you about regional and local impacts, resources for addressing drought, and information about what various tribal nations are doing, both short-term and long-term regarding drought. This webinar series is being done as a collaboration with several organizations from NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. We have Britt Parker and Molly Wolishin. From the High Plains Regional Climate Center, we have Crystal Stiles and Natty Umflett, and then Doug Cluck from NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information. Just a little bit of information about NIDIS before we get going. NIDIS was established in 2006 by public law with a mission to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS is building the foundation of a national drought early warning system, or DEWS, through the development of a regional DEWS, where networks of partners and stakeholders can share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. For a deeper dive into resources such as up-to-date and historical data regarding drought, I recommend checking out NIDIS's website. We'll put that in the chat for you too. The National Drought Mitigation Center, National Integrated Drought Information System, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Climate Hubs are working with states, tribes, and others across the country to collect condition monitoring observer reports on drought. So that's CMOR-drought, including photos. So your impact reports help us understand how drought is affecting local conditions, and you, state officials, and U.S. drought monitor authors review these reports to help verify what indicators are showing and to identify areas that need more attention. You can also check out drought impact reports for your area. If you are in Montana, you can use the Montana Impact Reporter in the same way. Learn more about following these links, which we'll put in the chat. All right, now to our speakers. Today we have Dr. Crystal Stiles from HPRCC. We have Doug Krogos from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and we're waiting to see what time Doug's gonna be able to log in. He may go at the end if when his meeting ends, his previous engagement. And then Dave Martin and Adam Molth, both from BIA Fire. And I'll introduce each of them more in detail as we go. Just a note that if you have questions, please post them in the chat and we'll be monitoring that. And then we'll answer them as we go if there's time, or we'll wait to the end, at which time you can, again, post your question in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute. Our first speaker, Dr. Crystal Stiles, directs the High Plains Regional Climate Center stakeholder engagement and tribal engagement programs. She coordinates with regional climate partners, evaluates climate data and information. Excuse me. And information needs for stakeholders in the region, and identifies and exercises opportunities to grow awareness and use of the center's climate data and information. Crystal also is a drought specialist, providing expertise and assistance on activities and projects led by the National Drought Mitigation Center at University of Nebraska-Lincoln and NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System. Crystal, go ahead.
All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Stefan, for that introduction. So I'm going to spend the next little bit just talking about basically giving an overview of the current and recent conditions regarding the drought in the Northern Plains, and also talk about the outlooks as well. Okay, so we'll start with current and recent conditions. And I'm actually going to start by going back about a year ago, because really this drought started developing very slowly last spring. And so if we look at temperature, for example, the image on the left, this is showing the departure from normal of temperature from May of last year to this past April. And you'll see in the Northern Plains here that we've seen above normal temperatures for that period, especially across large parts of North Dakota, where we saw 2 to 3 or maybe 4 degrees above normal. That's pretty significant for a 12-month period. And then on the right, this is looking at statewide rankings for temperature. So for the same time period, and this actually looks at years going all the way back to 1891. And we see that actually most of the country was above average during that period. But we especially see that North Dakota was much above average. I think this was 13th warmest May to April period, with some of the other surrounding areas were above average as well. And then if we look at precipitation for that same period, it's not been good. Looking at, again, kind of the hot spots here in North Dakota, over the past year, we've really only seen 50% of normal precipitation at best. So really just getting half of what we would really have expected during that time period. And then again, looking at statewide precipitation ranks, North Dakota ranked 9th driest for the May to April period going back to 1895. Wyoming was even worse at 3rd driest. And you'll see again here in the Southwest, it's been especially dry. And so we've seen some records there too. So if we start getting a little closer to now, just looking at the past 6 months, this is going back to the beginning of November. Again, it has been extremely dry during this period. So percent of normal precipitation, especially in these darker crimson colors, is less than 25% of normal precipitation. So just showing how dry that 6-month period has really been. And looking at the precipitation ranks for those 6 months, North Dakota had its driest November to April on record. Montana had its 8th driest. So this period, of late fall going into winter and early spring was very, very dry for the Northern Plains. And so I picked this particular time period to show you for temperature, looking at November through January, because this particular time was extremely warm. Both Dakotas had their warmest November to January period on record. Montana had its 2nd warmest. So this period, this is really important too, because the reason the temperatures were so high was because we really didn't have much snow on the ground, and snow tends to keep temperatures a lot cooler. And so without that snow cover, it's just going to be really warm. So that was essentially helping to drive these temperatures up during the late fall and into the winter. Now, what's been going on more recently? So these are looking at since May 1st. So what have we seen in the past month? Temperatures have been okay. They've been below normal in some areas like eastern Montana, northern parts of North Dakota, a little bit above normal in other areas, but nothing extreme on either end. But if we look at precipitation, we'll see there's kind of a big mix here. It's generally been pretty dry this month, but you'll notice that there were a few pockets here that actually have had above normal precipitation for the month so far. And a lot of this just recently fell in the last week or two. And so this particular area in southwestern North Dakota has gotten a little bit of short-term relief, I think I saw a lot of places got a couple of inches of rain, which does help in the short term, and it's helped to green up pastures a little bit, but they're very, very far behind where they should be. So we would have to continuously see these kinds of conditions to start really making a dent in the drought. So earlier I mentioned snowfall. So if we look at season to date, and so we actually consider the snow season starting in July 1st. And if you look at, again, the Northern Plains was very much below what they were expecting on that. So we're looking at, for the percent of mean, we're looking at 25 to 50% of that snowfall that we were expecting to get. And again, because of that lack of snowfall, temperatures were able to increase a lot more than they normally would. So then we also look at mountain snowpack, because this is essentially what feeds the streams, rivers, and tributaries in the springtime. And depending on that snow melt, and hoping to have some extra moisture going on there. But unfortunately, it's not been a great snow season for the mountains. It's not been a terrible snow season, but a lot of times we look at kind of split these two areas up and look at the upper Missouri Basin. And so the first one is looking at the snow water equivalent, which is basically if you just melted the whole snowpack instantaneously, that's what your liquid equivalent would be. We look at this area above Fort Peck Reservoir, that's in Montana, and then the other reach is between Fort Peck and Garrison reservoirs here in eastern Montana and western North Dakota. And the blue shading that you see is what we've actually seen with the snow water content. And then the red line here is the average from 1981 to 2010. So basically a recent average of what we have seen in the past few decades. And we see that in both reaches here, snowpack started off pretty well in the first few months, but then we see that it started to kind of drop off and is pretty much remained below that average for the rest of the season. And so the total above Fort Peck actually peaked in late March, which is a little earlier than what is expected. And it peaked at 86% of the normal peak. So it was below normal. The total from Fort Peck to Garrison did a little bit better. They had some later snows, and that allowed for a later peak in late April. And it actually peaked at, it was 96% of normal. So that's pretty close to normal for that. So then let's look at stream flow. So there's a lot of factors going in here. This is 28-day average ending May 25th. And things that we're looking at, any spring convective precipitation that helps with the stream flow. And then again, looking at snow melt as well, but we didn't have any snow melt. So unfortunately, between that and being very dry this spring, the streams are very, very low. However, so I pulled out North Dakota just because it really is, statewide is probably the worst, in the worst shape in terms of stream flow. You'll see all these little red, crimson colored dots, and that's indicative of much below normal stream flow than what we would expect for this last 28-day average. Now, I will say several days ago, I was looking at the same map, and several of these green dots here were crimson, but because of that recent precipitation that fell in this part of North Dakota, it has seemed to have helped recover streams just a little bit. So now let's just talk more specifically about drought conditions. This image on the left, you can find on NIDIS's website at drought.gov. And what's great about it is within their tribal engagement page, they are overlaying reservation boundaries over this U.S. Drought Monitor map. And if you're not familiar with the U.S. Drought Monitor, it's just a weekly snapshot of really what conditions are. And it's pretty much mostly based on the data that is seen, with a little bit of input from people regarding impacts and such. But you'll see these categories, they go from D0 to D4, and the worst category being exceptional drought. And so you'll see this area right here that is in the worst drought category, and that was just introduced a couple of weeks ago. And just to point out a few of the reservations that are dealing with this, this is Fort Berthold, so almost entirely in the D4. D3 is this red, so that's the next to worst category. So we have Turtle Mountain and Spirit Lake, and then we also have Fort Peck and Standing Rock, and then a good part of Cheyenne River Reservation that are dealing with that D3 as well. So quite a few reservations that are really at the heart of this drought right now. And then on the right, I included this from the National Drought Mitigation Center. It basically depicts whether you've seen improvement over time or degradation in conditions over time. And so this one's going back roughly about 6 months. So going back to mid-November. And we have seen a lot of degradation in the Northern Plains. And so the darker colors are meaning that we've seen several classes of degradation since that time. And what's interesting about this is that during the winter, it's very uncommon to see so many changes in drought conditions in the Northern Plains. So this was certainly a year that was very, very unusual. Soil moisture conditions, that's important for plant growth. And so unfortunately, they're just not looking very good. So this map is a modeled ensemble. So it's a lot of models that are kind of averaged together. And these redder areas and oranges you're seeing are, basically below normal soil moisture. So again, North Dakota really sticks out here as being not in good shape. And really, it's been this way at least since the fall, because there was very dry conditions in the fall, and then had very little snow melt in the spring to help recharge the soil at all. And then it's been very dry this spring, so soil moisture is very much depleted. I also wanted to include just a few stats on the pasture and range conditions. They're not looking very good. This is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And 71% of pastures in North Dakota are in poor or very poor condition, followed by Montana at 50% and South Dakota at 47%. And there have been a lot of impacts that have been showing up with this. So hay shortages leading to culling of herds. We've seen stock ponds drying up. And so there's been a lot of, mostly a lot of impacts to livestock. Also, just looking a little bit differently here at topsoil moisture versus subsoil moisture. And these maps, again, are from the USDA, and they're just showing basically, areas that are more depleted in their soil moisture. And again, you'll see North Dakota and South Dakota statewide are probably in the worst shape here. So being over 2/3 to 3/4 of the soil moisture is just very much depleted in these areas. So I'm going to move on to what are we expecting in the short term versus long-term outlooks. So this map shows it's basically a 7-day precipitation forecast. So how much precipitation is expected to fall in different areas. And so again, in our Northern Plains drought-stricken region, it does look like we're expecting some more precipitation, possibly up to 1 inch or more of precipitation in the next week, which again will be helpful, but probably not going to do a whole lot of good in the long term unless we can continue to get a lot of rain from that. And then if we look at these are from the Climate Prediction Center, and they put out a various number of outlooks on different scales. And so this one is an 8 to 14 days, so kind of going out beyond your typical forecast. And they do these for temperature and then for precipitation. And they basically put probabilities on the map. And so you'll see for the temperature, all these reds and oranges, that is all indicative of decent probabilities that temperatures are going to be above normal during this period, which is June 2nd to June 8th. So we're looking at warm conditions coming, and then for precipitation, this is indicative of below normal precipitation being favored for this period. So warm and dry, definitely not what we would want to hear. So then if we look at the same maps for June, this is for the entire month of June, pretty good probabilities here that we're going to see an above normal June for temperatures. And then for precipitation, again, this is all below normal. So maybe about the western half of the Dakotas, all of Montana, Wyoming, this whole area is expecting to continue to see below normal temperature, or I'm sorry, below normal precipitation throughout June. And then finally, if we look at summer, This is looking at the months of June, July, and August. So we're looking at a season as a whole here. It really doesn't look that much different for this region compared to the other outlooks. So again, we're seeing pretty good probabilities that summer is going to be warmer than normal. And then we also have some probability that we would expect to be seeing drier than normal conditions as well. So again, more warm and dry conditions throughout the summer. So given that, it's probably no surprise that this is not going to help the drought situation. And so this seasonal drought outlook goes through the end of August. And this entire area in the Northern Plains is in drought. It's not really expected to get better. It's expected to continue to persist. And in fact, areas to the west and to the south that are not currently in drought are expected to develop drought over the summer as well. So we're really, again, we're not seeing any long-term relief from drought right now. So in summary, drought really began to develop in the Northern Plains late last spring. It really didn't intensify a whole lot during the summer. It was more the fall when things really dried out and got very warm. And throughout the winter that we really started seeing the spread of drought and the intensification. And again, I've bolded in red that winter, it's very uncommon. Usually we have, we kind of have those conditions locked into place during the winter because of cold and snow and so forth. But this winter was different because it was, pretty much snowless and very warm. So we actually could see these degradations in conditions. So basically what happened is the Northern Plains went into spring with very depleted soil moisture, very little snow on the ground to melt and recharge the soil. So very little water available at all. And on top of that, the spring has not brought relief. It's been very warm and dry for that area, and precipitation deficits continue to mount. And because this area typically is getting most of their precipitation this time of year, seeing an inch a week or so is not going to really vastly improve conditions. So we would really have to see a lot more precipitation to start cutting into that drought a little bit. Impacts thus far, I know that's going to be covered a little more later, so I won't go into it too much, but I talked about the poor pasture and rangeland conditions. There's a hay shortage, so a lot of producers are culling their herds. Lack of water availability for livestock. A lot of the stock ponds are drying up, or the water quality of those ponds are not very good. And also the warm and dry and windy conditions have caused a pretty active fire season this, over the past couple of months. And so you'll hear more about that later in the webinar. Coming up for the summer, we are expecting it to be warm and dry, and drought's expected to persist. So that's all I have, and here's my contact information. So if you want to get in touch with me at some point, if you have questions about the conditions or resources for monitoring drought or anything like that, I would be happy to answer those for you. So thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. And we had a question early on in your talk. The question was, how is, quote, normal temperature and precip defined?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. So normal is a specific data set that looks at the last 3 full decades of data. And so since we just started a new decade, then our latest normal period is looking at 1991 to 2020. And so that's just some people would rather look at what more recently, because we know that we've been seeing changes in the climate, that rather than looking at a whole period of record, we kind of want to just compare what's going on now to what has more recently been going on. So yeah, so any of those maps you see comparing normal, they're looking at the new 1991 to 2020 time period. Great question.
And if anybody else has a question, feel free to type it in, or you can take yourself off mute before we move on to our next speaker. And can you see my screen being shared there, Crystal?
Yeah.
All right. All right. And our next speaker is Dave Martin. Dave is the Regional BIA Fire Manager for the Great Plains region, and he is based in Aberdeen, South Dakota, with 23 years of experience in fire. Dave, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Stefan. On the intro, my name is David Martin, as mentioned, and I'm the Assistant Regional Fire Management Officer for the Great Plains region, which you guys are seeing in front of you on the map. Kind of describes our situation and what we're dealing with. Currently, we have, in the Great Plains region, we have 12 reservations that we manage fire for, and that includes wildland fire management and fuels management. We have basically 3 reservations up in North Dakota, and that's Turtle Mountain, Spirit Lake, and Fort Berthold to the west. Then we have the northern portion of Standing Rock, and then we go down into Cheyenne River, and then we have Sisseton to the east, and that's Lake Traverse, but we call it Sisseton Agency. Then we got Crow Creek and Lower Brule in South Central. And then we have the big reservations of Rosebud and Pine Ridge. And then to the east, Yankton, and down in Nebraska, we have the Santee and the Winnebago agencies. It comes out to, well, it's actually 13 Indian reservations covering 17 million acres of ground. So basically we have West River, North and South Dakota, and we got East River. And you can see it's all delineated from the Missouri River. Okay, that being said, we deal with a split fire season, typically in a non-drought year, not like what we're dealing with now. In a non-drought year, when we're moist and soil moisture is not an issue, we have a split fire season, and that would be a spring fire season of usually April, May. And then we get green up in June, July, and then we get drier in August, and then we get the fall fire season of September, October, and November, and until the snow flies in the winter. Now, in a drought year like this year, we have a combined fire season, and that would be starting in, actually, we started earlier. We started March, April, May, and then it goes into June, July, August, September, October. So we end up having 6 more months of fire season now because we have this severe level of drought that we're dealing with currently. So that means we're not going to get a break in June, July, and August with the green grass. Okay. And our biggest concerns become the dry lightning potential in July and August. Okay. Whoever's handling, no, we need the other map with the fire occurrences right there. Yep. If you can zoom in on the upper right hand area where the fire is 1,000 acres, the table, basically that is our fire workloads from drought impacts and seasonal indices. Okay. You can see where we're at in 2021. If you go to Fort Berthold, there's that green dot, and that's the 10,500 acres. That was the Little Swallow fire. Okay, and that just occurred back on May 1st. So that's where we're at this year. Okay. If you go down to 2012, the yellow dot, that was our most active fire year thus far in the last 9 years. And that burned 107,000 plus acres. And that cost us 10.3 million acres to suppress those fires in 2012 because of the drought impacts were so severe. If you look at 2016, midway up the pack there, we had 21,000 acres. That's 2 fires. One fire was the Freeman fire on the west side of Pine Ridge. It was a lightning strike fire, and it burned 18,000 acres in one evening. Okay, so that tells you the potential of what we deal with in the summer on dry lightning. Okay, basically dry lightning storms will come usually in South Dakota in that July and August timeline. And if you have any drought of D1 moderate or more severe, we'll have no rain come with those systems and we'll start many fires. Our largest fire in 2012 was a Longhorn complex in the southwest corner of Rosebud Agency. 40 lightning strikes in July of 2012 occurred on that reservation and burned in one fire that went 43,000 burned acres. That was the Longhorn Complex. So that kind of tells you what we're dealing with. And the drought indices in that time, in July of 2012 in Rosebud for that fire, was actually D2 severe moving into D3 extreme. If you go to the Rosebud Agency in the southwest corner, yep, there you go. See the two yellow dots in the southwest corner of Rosebud? Yep, right there. That was a Longhorn Complex, and that burned 43,000 acres in July of 2012. Okay, so that's, if you look at this year as compared to last year, that segues into that map number 3, Stefan. Right there. That is the drought indices from the drought monitor map from last week, and that's overlaid with our reservational areas. You can see where our potential for the largest fires would start at Port Berthold with the extreme exceptional level drought, and then going down into the big areas of Standing Rock and Cheyenne River. You see where they have the D, that would be the severe or the extreme drought there. And what we're worried about is we're through the spring fire season, but we're moving into the June, July timeline of dry lightning. And that's where our biggest potential of fires are going to occur in those areas if we stayed warmer and drier than average. And looking at Crystal's, I guess, forecast, it looks like we're going to be heading in that direction, warmer and drier over the summer months. So really our biggest potentials are going to be the whole North Dakota area for our reservations, and then obviously in the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River. And if we get drier going south with the severe level drought going into Pine Ridge and Rosebud, we're going to have problems down there in the summer as well with dry lighting in the summer. Okay, so how do we deal with this? How do we deal with it as a region? How do we deal with this potential scenario? Because all of this impacts public and firefighter safety and our tribal assets. So we got to deal with this. So how we deal with it is every Thursday when the new drought maps come out, I write emails to all of our federal and state partners in our area that you see in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. If we have any drought at all in any of our reservational areas, I'm communicating that through email every Thursday when the new drought map comes out every week. Okay, so we communicate the problem. We communicate where is it getting drier? Where is it getting wetter? Okay, where are the large fires occurring? So letting people know what they're dealing with, it gets them ready and it gets them prepared before large fires occur. We've been doing this for the last 8 or 9 years, and it's been working very well for us. Okay, how do we deal with it? Well, we communicate it through email and through our partners. They also communicate that through their local volunteer fire departments, the guys on the ground that are dealing with these fires every single day. And then we plan and coordinate. And what we're doing there is we're telling people how we're dealing with those fires or how we're having to deal with those conditions before large fires start. And then the last, obviously, we communicate, coordinate, and we implement our fire management strategies. And what I mean by that is, like Fort Berthold, they had that large fire up there, the Little Swallow burned 10,500 acres in 3 hours on May 1st. They were already implementing, putting in dozer lines with dozers and motor graders. If you can, yep, there you go. That's the Little Swallow fire. And Fort Berthold, that's their largest fire to date, by the way, too, as well. And basically they were putting in fire lines. Do you have that one picture of the engine on the road, Stefan?
You seeing it now?
Stefan, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you see, are you seeing the picture now?
Yeah, right there. Okay, you see where they bladed the lines on the road? That's to stop the fires from escaping and burning across the road on the other side. And they're doing burnouts. So basically what they do is they have to change their strategies and they got to put in bladed lines around all these fires. Well, some of these areas are so rough and remote they have a hard time getting equipment in there. So the problem with drought is what it does is it goes over the grass, and then it goes into the grass roots, the brush roots, and the tree roots. And then it's hidden. You can't see drought. You can't see that impact. So not only you're getting dry lightning and resistance to control, and it takes longer to suppress these fires, but also the rekindling potential of old fires and putting in new fire starts and escaping becomes more apparent the drier you get, especially in severe level drought and worse or drier. So what happens is our fire guys on the agency areas, they got to deal with new fires and they got to deal with old fire, potentially rekindling because of the dry conditions and the lack of soil moisture. So we're dealing with fire weather conditions. We're dealing with cured fuels. You can see the May 1st, there's no green up in those grasses, okay? And because of lack of soil moisture, green up is slowed down. And then on top of it, the lack of soil moisture, that's our third dimension within the fire dimensional, three-dimensional environment that we look at. So fire weather, cured fuels, and then what you can't see is the below ground level is drought impacts. So that's how we're communicating the fire danger, and that's how we're dealing with it. We expand the ground ops, like these guys are expanding. They have more engines coming in. And then we can also even bring in fire aviation resources to monitor and help suppress those fires before they get large. But this is the largest one we've had to deal with to date. And this was May 1st of this year at Fort Berthold. Okay, that's all I have. I can give currently as of today, we've had 630 plus fires, and we've had almost 17,000 acres burned thus far. And that parallels our 2012 fire season, and we're right on par with number of fires and burned acres as we were in 2012. But we're drier this year. If you go back and look at 2012 up to this date versus this year up to this date, we are drier now than we were back then. Okay, we got, I think, D4 level drought in August of 2012. It finally showed up. We're already there, and we're in May of 2021. So that kind of gives you the comparison of this year versus our worst fire season of 2012. And again, our biggest concern is the dry lightning potential that's coming this summer with the warmer and drier conditions. This is more pictures of the Little Swallow fire on the southwest corner of Fort Berthold. Okay, Stefan, that's all I got on my presentation. Anyone have any questions? Okay, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Dave. If you do have questions, we can get to them at the end, so feel free to type them in the chat. We'll get to them later. And looks like Doug Krogos is trying to join us. So we maybe Danelle or Doug Cluck, maybe you could email Doug Krogos the call-in information.
All right, let's see if I can do that. Hold on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Our next speaker is Adam Wolf. Adam has been fighting fire for 31 years and most recently was the fire manager at Northern Cheyenne Agency. Adam is now in the process of reestablishing the fire operations at Fort Peck and is in that transition currently. And I'm hoping that, Adam, you can hear me. And let's see if your audio is working.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Testing. All right, good. I got it to work.
Great.
So, like you said, I'm transitioning from Northern Cheyenne, which is located in southeastern Montana, to Fort Peck Agency, which is northeastern Montana. And on the ground level, at the agency level, for Northern Cheyenne has been so far average as far as fire concerns. Last year was a pretty difficult year to obtain resources due to COVID and other fires that are going on. Typically, we rely on some of our firefighters from the southwest when their monsoons arrive, but they weren't getting those, and we weren't able to bring firefighters up to Northern Cheyenne. And then the Type 2 teams and the Type 1 teams were pretty much busy all summer. We were unable to get any of those firefighters or any of those teams in place. Northern Cheyenne did have one large fire, started from a coal seam, 56,000 acre fire. There are 90 plus coal seams documented on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation and surrounding the reservation. The particular coal seam that started the Sarpy fire was started on the Crow Reservation within a matter of hours due to the dryness and the time of the year for Northern Cheyenne. It progressed pretty quickly. We only had 53 personnel on that fire, where we were able to contain that fire. We were able to manage that fire. We couldn't get a Type 2 team in. We couldn't get any other resources in. Just to the east of us, there was a fire. I believe it was 30,000 acres, and they had a Type 2 team on that fire, which consisted of about 300 to 400 people. And so we had an average fire load for there. Now, talking about Fort Peck, just getting up here, just this year, 2021, I don't have any data for 2020, although I know there was a huge fire load. I believe they had 200 and something fires last year. On average, this reservation has about 87 fires a year. So far in 2021, since January, we're already up to 90 fires. 100% of those are human caused. 10% of those fires are above 300 acres, fast moving grass fires. Human caused, accidental, as well as intentional. Typically, we don't see tractors plowing their fields and starting grass fires until like August, September, but those are already happening. Just a week ago, we had a 50-acre fire that was started from a tractor plow, sparking hitting a rock. And so far, we've been getting some moisture, but like they were saying, for the long run, it's only going to make our field grow, into the growing period, and then that's just going to dry out from the winds. We're getting quite a bit of winds over here, so and eventually, come July, I think we're going to start having a lot of fires. And that's all I have for updating on the two agencies at the agency level. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Anything you want to ask Adam about? And if you want to chat or type in a question in the chat, feel free to do so. We can get to that at the very end. Looks like Doug Krogos has just joined us as well. Doug, can you hear me and can you test your audio?
Test.
Oh, great. I can hear you. Okay. So Doug Krogos is the water administrator for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and chairman of the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. Doug wears many hats, including recently leading the emergency response to COVID-19 at Standing Rock, as well as fighting the Dakota Access Pipeline through legal, political, and administrative efforts. Doug's going to talk about drought conditions and some work that they've been doing to address drought at Standing Rock. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, and thank everybody for being on the call today. I apologize for being a little late. We had a special economics committee, and I was called down there at the last minute today, and to give a report on some issues concerning the Dakota Access Pipeline and kind of what's going on now with the NEPA process and the EIS. And unfortunately, one of the other hats that I wear is not just a water resources manager for the tribe, but I work with the emergency management of the tribe as well. And we always are on trying to be on the always trying to be on the ball to what's next with the pipeline fight, of course, here in Standing Rock. So the leadership is trying to stay afloat and trying to figure out what our next steps are. And I had the opportunity to give them that information this morning, and I just got back. And again, I apologize to you guys for being on a little late, but I think drought impacts today, what we're talking about on the reservation here on Standing Rock. And thanks for the map that you, Stefan, that you put up. And of course, I think everybody knows where Standing Rock is. We're located, in the Missouri River Basin. We're located against the Missouri River on our eastern borders. We're located in 2 states, 2 different counties, and we're 2.3 million acres. A lot of our acreage some of it is irrigable. Some of it is acres that is undisturbed and untouched. A lot of grasslands, and we do have some irrigation projects on the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And so what we try to prevent is a lot of what could happen with droughts, and what are the conditions of droughts, and then how do we understand and implement any type of work for the impacts of droughts. So some of the things that drought is the impacts on Standing Rock for drought is there's a lot of sloughing from our rivers. As you know, the Army Corps of Engineers maintains the water levels of the Lake Oahe. That is the Missouri River, and right now the water levels are extremely low. I believe the last report I got, it was at like 1607, I believe, and they're infringing on our water rights. But what it's doing is it's allowing for a lot of it allows for erosion, but it also allows for looting. And it also allows for a lot of mud flats to happen. What we see with droughts is, people downstream for irrigation or navigation or whatever is needed down south of the Missouri River. I mean, of Standing Rock, and all the way into to the Mississippi is what the Corps is wanting to allow for. And what that does is it creates an erosion. It creates it creates a movement of the water level in Lake Oahe for Standing Rock, and it could do that does a lot of damage. There's a lot of damage done to our banks, and what it does is it kills a lot of area that our wildlife, our four-legged and our winged and our fish relatives can't handle. And so we see a lot of problems with the river system and the environment that it creates because of the water levels. That's huge, and that's major. And then I don't want to talk about any kind of infrastructure that's underneath the river, but we know that erosion from the water levels can cause and we've seen this before, earth movements, shifting of the ground, shifting of the soil, and what that can cause is some ruptures in any kind of infrastructure that's located under the river or beside the river. And fortunately, we haven't really had any major catastrophes as yet, but as an emergency manager, we practice, and we want to practice on during major events like drought conditions that can bring different aspects of environmental problems that it creates. And so some of the impacts of the fluctuation level of the Missouri River is just that, and that we try to prevent that by talking to the Corps of Engineers and saying, hey, raise the level of the water, you're gonna you're choking us out up here. But that becomes political, and I don't want to get into that. But some of the other things about drought conditions are, I think I heard somebody prior to me getting on was fire. There's a fire ban here on Standing Rock that the chairman and the tribal council put into effect because of the conditions. And so a lot of our relatives are having issues where when they want to have a ceremony, like because a lot of our ceremonies are contain fire. For instance, a nipi, or a sweat lodge. In order to heat our rocks, we have to have a fire. Well, we're having problems right now with the burn ban that the BIA is saying, hey, if you're gonna have a fire, if you're gonna have a sweat, oh no, okay, am I there? All right, sorry about that. That you need to let BIA know, and you need to let law enforcement know. Well, we have sweats all month, all month everywhere on reservations. So we're seeing that some of our fires are getting away. But what it's doing is also allowing for relatives to be more cautious of the drought conditions. And what are we doing to prevent from not having ceremonies on the reservation? And so some of the implementations are, understanding that, when you build a fire for sweat, for instance, because of a burn ban, because of drought conditions, be sure to have extra precautionary measures like, water or a fire extinguisher. It was kind of funny, a quick story. I don't know how much time I have, but I went to a sweat the other a couple of weeks ago, and there was actually we had a fire extinguisher at a sweat lodge, and you don't ever see that very often. As many years as I've been sweating, now there's a fire extinguisher by, so I guess any measures that's necessary in order to continue our way of life is very important. So that's just a few things. I think some of our four-legged relatives, like our coyotes, some of our deer, possums, ferrets, they're really seeing wildlife is seeing a lot of problems with drought conditions. What they're doing is they're starting to move closer together to these water sources, and we're seeing a lot of high traffic area of our wildlife to these areas in order to to get water. And we're seeing hunters come in, and that are what's the word I'm looking for, that are coming in illegally and poaching these areas that that are off limits to hunting. But poaching is becoming an issue of our drought conditions because of our four-legged relatives trying to figure out where they can get their water source. So that's an issue. So what are we doing, I guess? And I could talk about a lot of issues with drought conditions on Standing Rock. I mean, there's just a plethora of information that I can give, but I think what do we want to do, and how do we want to figure out what our next steps are? And some of the things that we've done is, like I said, put out proclamations to burn bans and to water use. Be careful how you use your water and what do you use your water for, limiting the use of, for irrigation, for instance, or watering your grass, or using it for, at home. so figuring out that that information and that data is very important to give to our leadership in order to make proclamations on such for such events. That's very important. Water resource management plans. Right now, I'm working with a company out of Rapid City who we have gotten funding through the BIA, and BIA is giving us funding to come up with the water management plans, and in different phases. So, like for instance, right now we're on phase 3, and it's the drought adaptation plan. We call it the DAP, and some of the things that are in our drought adaptation plans are things like contamination to water sources, water use, conservation and reliable infrastructure, agricultural practices, fire protection, of course, that we've been talking about, and preservation of traditional plants and wildlife. So, I mean, it all revolves around what are we doing in order to mitigate our drought conditions, and what are we doing in order to help with that out, or help that when these start to happen. So I want to be able to answer questions as well of anybody that might have some questions for Standing Rock. And again, I apologize for being late and not giving a full report or a projection PowerPoint, but I think all in all, I think working together with other tribes, working with as a water alliance that I'm a part of, and understanding the goals and the concepts of not just one tribe, but different tribes in a region, and what can you do to work together to not recreate the wheel, as Doug Cluck usually says. I know he likes recreating the wheel a lot, but what can we do to work together with organizations like NOAA or NIDIS or other organizations that are willing to help the tribes, and formulating a process for that is very important. So again, thank you, Stefan, and everybody for listening, and I'm here for questions.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, it was a great presentation, and thanks to all our speakers. We're right at the hour. We're going to stay on and answer any questions that you all may have. So feel free to stay in and put your questions in the chat for any of the speakers. We'll stay on for however long it takes. But looks like Wes had a question for Adam, and Adam, Wes is wondering how many types of fire teams are there? You mentioned Team 1 and Team 2.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, they're called incident management teams, and there's typically there's 1, 2, and 3, and 3 being the smallest, 2 being medium-sized team, and a type 1 team that's the largest of the teams. And what they do is they manage the fire, and they manage the personnel, or we call them resources. And so the type 1 team being the largest, there could be up to, I don't know, I think 25 to 30 people in that team, and they're experts in their area. So they'll bring in a meteorologist, the incident commander who runs the entire incident. There's operations people, there's logistical people, people to work, like a catering service to feed the firefighters. There's people that house the firefighters, like they'll set up an area for tents, fixing fire trucks. I mean, they're just huge teams. And as far as how many teams nationally, I'm not too sure. They change yearly. It takes a lot of years to get up to a type 1 team. To be able to be an incident commander. Typically those individuals have a lot of years of experience, a lot of paperwork, a lot of politics. You're working with a lot of different people, tribes, different governments. local governments to the federal governments, contractors to federal firefighters. I mean, just goes on. And I'm not an expert at it, so that's about as good as I can get on that one.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah. Other questions for any of our speakers?
Quick question from my namesake, Doug. You mentioned the core and low water levels on reservoirs and exposure of sensitive tribal items. Do you work directly with not only the Corps but the National Park Service too? Because I've heard they have jurisdiction in some stretches as well. And any other federal agencies, I guess, that pay attention to this, maybe even state?
Yeah, we do actually. We work with the local Corps of Engineers on figuring out how we can enter the waters and find, for instance, looting. Just the other day, we had some looters on our side of the reservation down by Kennel on the state line that we monitored for quite a number of hours before we called in the state game and fish and parks, and then with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, Fish and Game and Fish met at a place where they can enter the water together, and called in the Corps of Engineers saying that we're going to be investigating a possible looting along the shores of the Missouri by the state line on the west side of the river, and gave them some Latin long that we could, and then went and tried to identify who and what they were doing out there. And unfortunately, there's a number of boaters and anglers out right now, and they got away. So what they do is they go to areas across the river where the reservation isn't, and they figure out how to get in and out of areas where there isn't a boat ramp, and they get in their trucks and get on, put their boats in their camper or their trailers, and they leave when they see a suspicious activity. So it was kind of interesting. At one time when we were one of our game and fish guys was looking at looters because of the low, and they were looting, walking along the shores. There was a guy in a boat that was looking at him, looking at them. So they're very smart. I think about 15 years ago, there was a looting. There were some looters on the other side of the river that are now chairman Mike Faith. He was a part of the Game and Fish, and they got with the state, and they went and they confiscated the boat and everything in it, and altogether they priced everything out at $500,000 of material that they'd got that they were willing to sell. So there's a profit. There's a profit for drought. There's a profit for looting. There's a profit that happens along the banks of the Missouri River, and almost probably 90% of the materials that was taken were not really our tribe, as the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. There were other tribes that had been along the river for many years, and so we try to protect that as well. So yeah, good question, Doug, my namesake, but I didn't mean to say what I said to you earlier. I take that back.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And Doug.
Doug, I was just going to say the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. That's all I can say.
Other questions? Yeah, so just a preview for the rest of the summer. We're hoping to do a similar.
Yes, David, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Dennis.
For Doug Crocost. That was interesting. You talked about how the impacts from drought also affects the wildlife by narrowing down their opportunities to drink water, so they congregate more, and it's kind of has an impact there. And I'm in the middle of helping our tribe revise our Fish and Wildlife Conservation Plan, so I'll take that into consideration when we finalize it. Thanks for your direction on that.
Yeah, Dennis, what we're seeing is these corridors to these areas where wildlife tend to use in order to get to water resources. And a lot of times there's roadways, and we're seeing a huge number of fatalities on our roadways of our four-legged relatives trying to get to these waters, where before there was watering holes, you know, on the west side of the road, and they didn't have to cross the road in order to get to a watering hole. Now they're crossing these roads, and we're seeing just a huge number of fatalities of not only deer, but also you know, possum and ferret and you know, a lot of our endangered species. And so what do we do in order to protect that, you know, that corridor, or protect them from, you know, traveling the gauntlet? I always say, what do we do? Do we, you know, fill up their watering holes, or how do we, you know, how do we do that? So yeah, Dennis, good luck on that. And if you need any more information, let me know. We're you know, always trying to address our wildlife protection plan as well. So, and what can we do with drought?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the purpose of this webinar series, is to kind of share information across what folks are doing throughout the region related to drought specifically this summer. And so the next month we'll do a similar webinar. We'll bring on a number of different speakers, but focusing on drought on tribal lands. And one thing I was just going to mention about your water resources plans, Doug, is at Standing Rock, is that it's obviously valuable because you're working with other managers at the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. So that includes Rosebud Sioux Tribe, Oglala Sioux Tribe, Flanders Santee Sioux Tribe, and obviously Standing Rock. But then the real value there too is that the work that you're doing can be passed on to the next water manager, and so that work can build off of itself, and that continuity of operations and establishing a record of what you're doing there to address drought. So a lot of value there. Do we have any more questions folks want to ask any of our speakers?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, who does your hair?
Yeah, I got an in-office guy who
I'd
cuts
fire
my
him.
hair. Yeah, you like it? Yeah. Hey, I got a general question for any tribal person and maybe BIA fire people. You know, you guys are saying it's already as bad as or worse than some of your worst years. And maybe this is a sensitive question.
Doug, you just went on mute.
Are you guys adequately? Somebody muted me. Yeah. Are you adequately prepared to deal with what may be coming, especially when things start drying out in July or tomorrow? I mean, I'm asking sort of generally. I don't mean that as a negative. I'm just wondering if you're in an point, and you know, if you can get help from the tribes to or vice versa to beef up your response. How about that, Dave?
That's a great question, Doug. This is Dave Martin over in Aberdeen. We're already beefing up with funding to expand operations on the ground level and aviation level. So as long as we have that opportunity to do so, we can be prepared for what we're facing and through the summer months with the dry lightning, at least in our neck of the woods anyway. So yes, we have been preparing for months on this. And we have been tracking the drought last year or so as well.
So that whole drought monitoring thing actually pays off for you all.
Yes, it does. Anytime we have any drought impacts or lack of soil moisture in our areas, we're tracking it even through the wintertime. So we're letting people know what areas to be careful of and where our biggest concerns are. That's how we do it anyway. So
I thank you, David.
Looks like Bryce has a question. Bryce, you want to go ahead? You can take yourself off mute, or you can type in the chat. Yep.
Okay. Hey, so Sorry, I was juggling two calls in the beginning there, but I'm the regional fire management officer out of Billings for Rocky Mountain region. So Montana tribes on the BIA side. So just to give you guys a quick rundown of what we have done, nationally, we requested long-term severity for Fort Peck Agency, and Adam's up there helping us out. I appreciate Adam giving a quick update on what's going on up there. But so long-term severity, we've requested that, got approved. It actually expires next week, Tuesday, but I'm looking to extend it another 30 days. So we'll be doing that, and that's going to help with funding and bringing in resources to help cover that area and our surrounding neighbors and cooperators. So yeah, we've been hurting up there in that corner. We've been monitoring that daily, weekly, monthly. Yeah, it's been challenging, but we are working on that. Thanks. Any questions?
No questions, but Stefan, I'm not sure if you want to talk, or maybe Molly wants to say anything about future information sort of delivery that we're going to be doing. Just so you know, this isn't a one-off.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Yeah, we're aiming to do a series of these webinars specifically focused on drought on tribal lands. The next one will be in June, and we'll be aiming for the 4th Wednesday in June again. But keep your eyes open for emails regarding the exact date and time and what speakers will be on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Molly.
Sorry, I was just going to chime in. My name's Molly and I'm with NIDIS. And if there is a need for more information for the conditions and outlooks, we could certainly help provide that. There is also a monthly webinar that Doug Cluck does host as well, so we can make sure you're tied into all of those opportunities. So if you are interested in getting more frequent information, just let us know.
And you can reach out to me directly. I just put my email in the chat if you do want more information or need any further assistance. I'm sure all of our other speakers would feel comfortable as well sharing their info. Looks like Molly just put hers in the chat.
Hello, Stefan. I got a little update I wanted to give.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
I'm part of the Montana Drought Work Group, and we've been getting some significant rains finally. So we were in a border between a D2 and a D3 designation. And I think after this little front that goes through, we're talking about maybe status quo or even downgrading. So Doug's last presentation got me to thinking. I'm involved in 3 different plans right now. I'm helping the Fish and Game with their conservation plan, and I'm helping our DES coordinator with our hazard mitigation plan. And I'm also finalizing my climate change adaptation plan for the community. We're trying to get it finalized by the end of the summer. So we'll have our document completed for the climate change program. So drought is the main issue in all 3 of these plans. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Thanks for that update. Got a lot on your plate. All right, yeah, if there's no more updates or questions, in the chat, we've got a bunch of emails in case you want to reach out to any of those folks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of our speakers for a great webinar. I put the YouTube link in which we'll be putting the recording on. It's the NC Casks YouTube page. So that's in the chat, and that should be out later today. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thanks.
This means vaccinated.